Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy Hanukkah. It's technically still the first day of Hanukkah, actually. It will be until sundown. Today, I want to talk to you about freedom of speech on campuses, K through all the way. I've seen a lot of activity today on X. I still feel weird calling it that. You guys will excuse me. Anyone watching this on the replay, it just so happens to be December 8th, 2023. So if you're watching this years from now and you're wondering, what the hell is she talking about? Yeah, there was this thing that used to be called Twitter, which you've probably already forgotten about because that's how the news cycles work. That, it won't be what, I don't know, 3-4 more weeks, maybe we'll still remember what it was called. Anyway, I'm kidding. But so what I've seen is a lot of flap about a young woman who has been suspended from NYU. I'm trying to find the actual incident so that we can look at it. Yeah, I found it. And she's very upset. She is very upset because she believes that she has some kind of inalienable right to rip down posters of hostages, missing hostages. I'm going to go ahead and put my little ear deals in so that we can hear what she has to say because it seems to me that might be important. Let me just fix my settings here and then y'all can see. All right. So what's going to happen is I'm going to start this and I do need to get it back to the beginning. Right? And here's what it says. An NYU student who tore down posters of Israeli hostages complains that she's been suspended from school, had her scholarship rescinded, and will be kicked out of campus dorms next semester. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to get a ton of context as far as, like where this, well, anyway, let's just listen to her.
After I was filmed tearing down these posters outside of Tisch Hall, a student at NYU
outside of Tisch Hall, that's on the campus.
I circulated the video on social media, and she was calling for us to be doxxed.
Okay, I need to see that she was calling for them to be doxxed. Doxxed being, she lives here, go get her.
Shortly after celebrities, public figures, and Zionist platforms with millions of followers.
Zionist platforms. Oh my God, scary.
We're sharing our information publicly.
Like your name, because you were out there publicly pulling things down. This is what's funny to me is she went to a public place where posters were and posters are allowed to be outside of Tisch Hall. And in full view of anybody walking by, and at this point in 2023, you know that people are going to be recording what you're doing, even to congratulate you. They were recording this, and now they're telling their friends, and she is upset. How much do you want to bet this very same person has recorded other people saying or doing things she didn't like and broadcast it to the world and said, "There's students at my school," or who knows what, or called for people to come and join her in protesting Israel, and this is where the Jews are? I would lay odds. But even if she didn't, I really want to know, where has she been for however long she's been at NYU to, protect the free speech rights of even those Zionists she doesn't like? Because I have a sneaking suspicion if you're ripping down posters, which is effectively removing the speech of others, her respect for the freedom of speech for her fellow students is not so very good.
The student also created a petition,
Oh, noes, a petition, more speech.
which received over 10,000 signatures.
How much you want to bet her name is on some petitions against Israel?
To call for the expulsion of everyone in the video.
And why not? You're interfering with the free speech of others on a college campus by ripping down posters that you could have walked on by. If you didn't like them, didn't want to read them, walk on by. They didn't belong to you. They belong to the people who put them up and everybody else who might want to read them. That's how freedom of speech works.
I faced relentless backlash.
You mean like every Jewish student on your campus has since the bombs started falling from the IDF Act? No, wait, I take it back. Since before then? Yeah, like them.
from right-wing media news outlets for
Right-wing news media outlets.
weeks, most calling for me to be jailed, expelled, deported, assaulted, and
Yeah. I don't think any news media outlets were calling for you to be assaulted. I also don't think they were calling for you to be deported. Individuals on social media, yeah, I can believe that. But, since you're out there calling for all the Jews in Israel to be murdered, yeah, I'd say, good for the goose, good for the gander.
to be sent to Gaza. NYU refused to cover off-campus housing because I'm on scholarship, so I couldn't really afford to live in New
Well, maybe you should recognize that your scholarship came with a signature that you would adhere to the rules of the school and the code of conduct of the school, and that any violations could put your scholarship in jeopardy because it does say that. So,
New York otherwise. So despite it like no longer being safe for me to live in dorms,
welcome to the world of every Jewish student at NYU.
they denied me access to off-campus housing. And
No, they didn't deny you access. They wouldn't pay for it. You have access to off campus housing. You just admitted you can't afford it. That's a you problem.
now they're denying me access to higher education.
No, they're not doing that either. They're not. So, if you would like to go anywhere in the Arab world, I have a sneaking suspicion that the people in, gutter will pay for it for you at this point. You're probably going to get money rolling in on a GoFundMe page that'll adequately pay for whatever your education is, and they're only denying you access to your education temporarily right before the holidays when there's not much going on except exams, which they'll allow you to make up because by law they sort of have to. So you've been minorly inconvenienced, but for the housing, which again was something you agreed to when you accepted free money from other people. Yeah.
So just to get this straight, NYU suspended you, took away your scholarship, made it impossible for you to afford housing.
No, 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 no. It was impossible for her to afford housing beforehand. She accepted money to pay for her housing with conditions and strings attached that she no longer wants to live up to.
All because you tore down a poster.
Not all because she tore down a poster. It's not like it was like, oh, there's a poster there blocking a window people can't see out of. Oh, it's a poster that is in the way of what I need to put up for a poster, and it's been there for 3 weeks and it has outdated information. It's not just tearing down a poster. It is tearing down many posters, first of all, put up by other people in a place where posters are allowed because she didn't like what the poster said and didn't want other people to see them, which is a violation of the freedom of speech of the people who put the posters up and everybody around who wanted to read the posters. She had options. Don't tear the poster down. Walk on by. She had an option. No one put her in that position. No one forced her to rip it down. No, ripping it down was not central to her learning at this institution. Ripping it down was not something that, like is of academic value to anyone else. It's not even the free flowing exchange of ideas in any meaningful way, but let's say you think it is. She got to do it. She's not in jail. She's not being deported. People can call for things all they want. She's not being deported. They can't do that to her. Her freedom of speech has been respected and protected. She did what she did, and she's not suffering any legal consequences from the government. The fact that the school is funded by the state and run by the state is not the same thing quite exactly. And ripping down posters is not just engaging in free speech. It's actually denying the speech of others. But I'm going to get into that in more detail. I just had to interject there because this guy is framing this in a very weird way that you might be tempted to go, well, yeah, they made it impossible for her. No, it was, as observable reality, impossible for her to afford housing, but for her scholarship. And she knew this when she ripped the poster down.
As a part of my scholarship, that would grant me on-campus housing. And so because I was suspended, I would have to move off campus after the semester, essentially kicking me out of the dorms.
Because that's part of what suspension does, which is why they put it there, so that you won't do the things that are offenses worthy of suspension, because it needs to have teeth. Otherwise, you're going to just do those things. What was the point of a code of conduct otherwise, especially when attached to money? Now, flip things around, and it's a Jewish student on scholarship who can't afford to live there or be there but for the money and largesse of other people, who is ripping down Palestinian posters saying, hey, come meet for whatever, or these are Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, and they're ripping them down and ripping them down and ripping them down. And the same thing happens to a Jewish student. How many people would step up and say, whiner, complainer, it's not your money, you don't have a right to free housing, yada, yada, yada. Go back to Israel because, if you're more loyal to Israel than America, then go there. I submit to you pretty much everyone, including this woman.
Leaving me unhoused and also
Unhoused. Do you have no friends? You can't sleep on a couch for a while till you sort your shit out.
also denying me access to any higher education
Until
fall 2020.
Oh, fall 2024. Well, that'll give you a good amount of time to work and save up the money for your housing too.
Wow.
And they have also restricted my privileges, so I am not able to attend on-campus, off-campus events or participate in any student club.
And why not? Why shouldn't they do that? You've demonstrated that you behave in antisocial ways that violate their code of conduct. You were willing to risk your scholarship to do it. So they figure the bar is pretty low on your ethics and your code of conduct for yourself. So there's that.
Clubs.
Poor baby. So they're saying this, oh, isn't this sad? And somebody comes in and says, I'm really sick of having to defend people with whom I disagree, but this is America. We have the First Amendment. And if she was admitted based on merit, again, there's an if, we've qualified it. We don't know, but she was admitted to the school. Colleges are absolutely the place we should encourage people to make edgy arguments to be judged in the marketplace of ideas. So ripping down posters put up by other people in a place where posters are allowed is an edgy argument. That's an action. It's not an argument. It's an actual physical vandalism action. And here's what I said. No, you don't have a right to behave this way and retain a spot in an institution that has admissions requirements. Guy just admitted if she got in on merit, it has admissions requirements and codes of conduct, which it also has. That's been upheld in the Supreme Court. She is not being put in prison. So her right to speak has not been taken away from her. She's speaking now. I just did this thing. She's all over the place talking about what her opinions are. Is anyone infringing on her freedom of speech? No, not at all. Her privilege to remain at the university without interruption is what's been disrupted. Her free housing is what's been disrupted. And this has now gone on back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? There are several elements to this, but I want to get into the decision that first made the whole you have free speech on campus now this thing that people scream about, like it's unlimited, and that speech includes actions, not just words, not just ideas existing on a shelf or expressed in a classroom in a polite manner. It's not even just hosting a speaker, but it's anything I want to do to express the ideas that I hold, anything whatsoever, no matter what it does to other people or their ability to hear ideas other than my own, their ability to share ideas other than my own. It's free speech, it's free speech, free speech. I have all the freedom of speech. But please, let's have hate speech codes on campus, okay? But the people screaming about free speech, the loudest right now, today, anyway, are going back to this Tinker v. Des Moines. Now, this happens to have been in a K-12 setting. So those of you who are watching because you're very interested in K-12 policy and free speech, but this does extend all the way up to the university, still, especially NYU public school. And because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, it extends into private schools, as we saw the other day at Penn. It does extend. There are protections into the private schools, especially if they take even one nickel of your money, but it applies regardless. The Bill of Rights also applies, as does the Civil Rights Act, to private settings. Okay, so This landmark case from 1969 cemented students' rights to free speech in public schools. You basically had Mary Beth Tinker and her brother and a couple other people wear black armbands to school uh, to protest Vietnam. They were suspended. A young lawyer from Des Moines, Iowa, Dan Johnston, took the case all the way to Supreme Court, and in a ruling 7-2, it said the famous statement: "Students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate." Certainly, they do not. By the way, neither do teachers. Neither do teachers. The court's majority opinion, written by Justice Abe Fortas, went on to affirm the freedom that young people have under the Constitution. And I'm going to read it, but I'm going to make sure I read the parts that you guys never hear about. In our system, state-operated schools may not be enclaves of totalitarianism. That's interesting. Keep that in mind. School officials do not possess absolute authority over their students. Again, very interesting considering cancel culture and various hate speech codes and rules and reporting. Let's continue. Students are possessed of fundamental rights, which the student must respect, just as they themselves must respect their obligations to the state. Ooh, icky. In our system, students may not be regarded as closed circuit recipients of only that which the state chooses to communicate. Again, fascinating in light of what's going on in our schools. They may not be confined to the expression of those sentiments that are officially approved, DEI officers. In the absence of specific showing of constitutionally valid reasons to regulate their speech, students are entitled to freedom of expression of their views. Here we go. And then I'm going to go read from the opinion itself. There are still limits on what students can do in public schools. Under the ruling, students can't violate the rules that aren't targeted at expression, like attendance policies, as long as their school is applying the rules equally. We know schools are not, right? So, I mean, there are so many lawsuits that just need to happen that haven't happened yet, regardless of whether students have broken them to protest or for other reasons. And students can't materially, here it is, materially disrupt the functioning of their school, though what's considered disruptive can depend on the situation. So the protests themselves that I'm sure this woman has participated in, that scream and yell with bullhorns to the point where people can't hear the professors speak, where they can't sleep at night and they can't study in the library for exams. Would a reasonable, rational people, irrespective of what your opinions are, would you say that that materially disrupts the functioning of the school? Would you say that that materially disrupts the freedom of association and engagement and thought and ideas and speech of other students who are not agreeing with you and participating in a protest? See, because I would. So would I think most people. And then they go into since then. Now I'm going to go to the opinion itself and read some more salient parts that you never hear about. In order for the state, in the person of school officials, to justify prohibition of a particular expression of opinion, it must be able to show that its action was caused by something more than a mere desire to avoid discomfort and unpleasantness that always accompany an unpopular viewpoint. Now, do you think a school like NYU could legitimately claim that it was desirous of avoiding an outcome that was more than just unpleasantness for Jewish students or any students for that matter? Because it's not just Jewish students who see those posters of the hostages and would feel discomfort watching someone rip them down, all the while calling them propaganda and lies. Do you think that their desire to prevent that kind of behavior in the future and thus have a rule against it and discipline people who undertook it, do you think that that might be caused by a desire to avoid something more than the mere discomfort? See, I do, again, because that thing could escalate pretty quickly into fisticuffs at a minimum. But let's keep going. Certainly, where there's no finding and no showing that engaging in the forbidden conduct would materially and substantially interfere with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school, the prohibition cannot be sustained. First of all, there was material destruction to property not belonging to the student. The space may be public, the poster's not. And since the poster was put up legally, both lawfully and within the rules of the school, her ripping it down constitutes vandalism. So it almost doesn't matter what the poster said or who she is or who she doesn't like and who Zionists are and what's going on in Gaza. None of that matters. What matters is, for reasons she cannot substantiate other than I don't want other people reading this poster. It's not even just I don't want to read it. I don't want anyone to read it, because she always had the option to walk by, right? No one's forcing her to read it. No one's forcing her to agree with it. Nothing is being forced upon her. She could just turn away, pull up your little scar, your little keffiyeh, and don't look at it. Okay, your scarf. So she was actually taking action on her ideas, turning her thoughts and her opinions into actions to prevent anyone else from having the freedom to engage with that material. I think they're on solid ground. I really do. And see, in that case with the armband, I'm just silently wearing an armband, silently sitting in class, doing all the other things that my classmates are doing. There's absolutely, that was the school obviously and explicitly punishing them for their opinion, for the opinion they held. Now, fast forward to 2023. Kids getting punished for microaggressions, kids both at the K-12 and college level, speech codes, preventing triggering words, allowing students to disrupt conservative speakers to the point where they have to cancel them because nobody can hear because they're screaming, yelling, and blocking access, allowing people to protest to the point where they're so loud and so disruptive and so physically obstructive that the school cannot function. The professors can't teach. They're coming into classrooms with bullhorns. Schools are allowing that and going, free speech, we can't stop it. Not true. You can stop it, and you should stop it, because you can show that it is substantially interfering with the work of the school and impinging on the rights of other fucking students. Excuse my language. I hope all of you know me well enough to know at this point that I'm as close to a free speech absolutist as you're going to find. But we are talking about the Supreme Court ruling, which is what everybody is talking about and claiming supports this woman, claiming her free speech has been violated and that she's suffering too great a punishment by the state. Now let's talk about her punishment a little bit. Let's talk about that, and then we'll look at some other things. I'm going to unshare for a moment here. Does she have a constitutionally protected right to that scholarship? No. Does she have a constitutionally protected right to housing? No. Only, what does she have a protected right to? To have the contract she signed upheld, to have all the terms upheld and respected and not violated, because otherwise that would be fraud. Right? So if she signed something that said, we promise to give you housing no matter what you do, no matter what, until you finish your degree, even if it's, whatever. Then you have a right through that contract. They have an obligation to deliver to you. They've created a right legally with that contract. But I'd bet my life savings that's not what that contract says. I bet it says, should you engage in any conduct that violates our code of conduct at the university, or should you do this, or should you do that? There's probably a lengthy list of the things in detail that you may not do and retain your scholarship, including not doing well in your classes. Not maintaining your scholarship, not maintaining your housing allowance, not maintaining all sorts of things, not maintaining access to your ability to go to the school. In fact, I think it was rather generous of them to say you can come back in the fall and you get your shit together. You can do that. And that's probably written in the code of conduct. And the reason I would say, the reason everybody's going, oh my God, but freedom of speech is, we are so accustomed to having to, if you're on the right at all, having to defend freedom of speech of conservative students, that we now have this knee-jerk reflexive freedom of speech, freedom of speech, freedom of speech, instead of thinking like, wait a second, it never was absolute. It never was absolute. And it's certainly not absolute in this situation, but we're so used to getting picked on and having our speech curtailed and being canceled that we now have this whole, oh my God, any infringement is a total infringement. No. Don't you want to be able to discern and, shut down the communists when they're being aggressive and behaving in totalitarian ways that make it impossible for you to hear Ben Shapiro? Don't you want to be able to say, You're actually fucking with my life now. I've paid to be here. I have a right to hear this. You don't have to come. You don't have to hear it. Go away. You don't own this space. We all own this space. Don't you want to be able to do that? And so that people like Ben Shapiro won't be canceled? I would hope so. Because you have freedom of speech too. That is your freedom of speech. Like, let's defend it for everyone. It's like, yes, let's defend it for everyone when all things are equal, when it's like apples and apples. So, no, you can't shut down, having a speech given by the leader of CARE or some guy who is loyal, is loyal to Hamas, much as you hate him, much as you think he's an ass, the head of the KKK, whatever. No, you can't shut down that speech any more than they should be able to shut down Ben Shapiro. So I get it. I get the knee-jerk reaction to go, it's terrible. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. On the other side, I pretty much want to punch some of these leftists in the face, the hypocrites. Give me a speech code. This is hate speech. That's hate speech. Our speaker's right, but your speaker's wrong. Like, I have a right to hear good people, but not bad people. These Maoists are perfectly content to shut down your free speech any old time they want, including this woman. I'm ripping down posters, and that's totally fine. That's freedom of speech. But screw you if you punish me for it. You should, you don't have free speech. I do. Yeah, they can just fuck right off. And I can say that because this is behind a paywall. But both sides, so to speak, are missing what's going on here. What's the real issue here? What's really the problem? Oh, well, I'm going to argue something probably nobody's argued lately, at least in your, milieu, if you will. And that is that this whole problem was created by the Civil Rights Act in the first damn place, and by the fact that we have public schools at all, K-12 or otherwise, all the way up to university, and that if we didn't have government-run education and government-run spaces, and we didn't have the government in so many aspects of our lives, and if we kept the Civil Rights Act to desegregating things that are literally public spaces, government buildings, etc. But see, we already had public schools by then. That's what it was pretty much instigated by, right? But if we still allowed freedom of association and freedom of speech for real, and I know it'll make a lot of you gasp, but like, you mean that people could actually segregate their lunch counter? And they could actually, let's remember, the original, the municipal buses, the whole issue with the segregated buses, they were municipal buses. They weren't privately owned. It wasn't like your Uber car. Okay. These were owned by the state. So yeah, that's not allowed. So the Civil Rights Act should have limited itself to municipal property, state property, federal property, the military, things that are literally government run, even the military academies, if you want to keep those because they're military. But it's only by virtue of the fact that we have public schools at all that we have to get into this conversation about whether someone's rights are being violated on the campus. If it's truly private and if the Civil Rights Act didn't apply and they weren't getting federal loan money and federal grant money, and if everything were private, that would be a marketplace of ideas. And that's when the market would decide that if, for example, a college in, the middle of whatever decided that it wanted to go ahead and allow there to be a KKK fraternity house and not accept any Black students, but it was totally private, like completely private. And it was just like, no, we don't want them here. That's what we're doing. Yeah. If you had Catholic schools, it didn't have to make non-Catholics. If you had Muslim schools, if everything was just left to like, we can self-segregate all we damn want because it's our money and it's our land and it's our space and it's our this, that. And none of them were tax deductible or, like tax-free. Like they were private and really private, not non-for-profit, which means we don't pay taxes on the money we make. I'm talking private. All the same obligations to do everything as any private citizen. And if we allowed that, we wouldn't be having this conversation because there wouldn't be an NYU. The NYU wouldn't have to sit there and figure out where's the dividing line between what's public and what's private and what rights we have to uphold and whose rights and when. And we wouldn't be getting in these arguments. It would be a private school that could say, you're acting like an asshole and we don't want you here anymore. Goodbye. There'd be no argument. It wouldn't be First Amendment this, First Amendment that. It would just be like, well, she violated the rules, so she's kicked out. It'd be like getting fired from your job. Nobody says, for example, yeah, so I put in my email to my coworker that my boss is an asshole and they fired me. And I mean, my freedom of speech has been violated. I should be able to say that my boss is an asshole. And it's like, and you did, and you can, and you're not going to prison. You said that. What you don't get to do is keep your job. Because, yeah, so it doesn't work like that, right? You don't get to say, for example, to the HR director at your company, now because of government regulations, don't hire any more women. We don't want any more women in our company. If you call yourself an equal opportunity company, if you follow those federal rules and you're getting whatever federal designations that come with that being equal opportunity, you don't get to say that. You don't get to say, we're not hiring any more women. I'm one of those people who thinks you should be able to say that. You should be able to direct your HR to hire or not hire whoever the fuck you want. It's your company. But if it's a publicly traded company, publicly owned company, even by stockholders, no, you can't do that. Not at least without disclosing it. But thanks to the Civil Rights Act, you can't do it at all. No freedom of association to that level. And some people will say, well, Dad, we wouldn't have gotten there without it. Blah, blah, blah. Well, you can say that. Or you could say we'd have gotten there quicker and we wouldn't be having all these DEI conversations because it would be very well known that like it's okay to be racist in America. And like legally. Morally, it's reprehensible. Ethically, yuck. But the state isn't going to lock you up or punish you. And if you're an employer and you want to go ahead in the marketplace of your world and let it be known, that restaurant over there, they don't serve Black people like at all. I think that restaurant would last 5 minutes. It just would go out of business because the marketplace would go gross. And I know that because, or I say, I believe that. I don't know it, but I believe that because we are already seeing people say, I'm not shopping at Target anymore. I'm not Target. They're preferencing trans people over women, biological women, as an example, or they're preferencing a leftist Maoists over conservatives. I'm not going over here because they've given money to company to politicians who want to take away my guns. So I'm never shopping there again. That's what the marketplace does. And that's what the marketplace is doing with the civil rights protections where they get to pretend that they're equal opportunity and still discriminate. Now imagine you took those protections away back in the 1960s and let everybody be the biggest dumbass they want to be. Where would we be now? Okay. At the same time, we would truly have the liberty to have the students we want in a school, the students we don't want in a school, the students that want to do something very special and weird, whatever, are going to have to start their own school. And pretty quickly, the very bad ideas that really aren't that popular would have no purchase. They would have nowhere to go. Instead, what we've done through our freedom of speech is we have subsidized the living shit out of really bad ideas like Maoism, communism, Marxism, Lysenkoism, because freedom of speech. But we've subsidized it. We haven't just allowed it. Understand that. It's not just like you can do it because it's America and you have freedom of speech. No, we've paid for it. We've subsidized it. And what's more, we have subsidized it at the tip of a gun. Pay your taxes. And we, your overlords, are going to send this tax money to the people we want to send it to. So your freedom of speech, guys, you can argue over this woman in the keffiyeh. Your freedom of speech, your freedom of association, your freedom of, private property ownership, your freedoms were violated a long fucking time ago when they created the public school system in the first damn place. When they created the land grant schools, when they created the state universities, when they did all of this state subsidized education, state owned education, they violated your right to choose how to educate your children and where to send the money for education for even for other people's children. So to me, this whole argument is academic. We're playing in their sandbox. We're having this argument because the state runs all this shit. And so now we're sitting there going, well, you run it, so you have to protect my rights. And I'm over here going, that's cute. I mean, you're not completely wrong, I guess, but you're kind of missing the point, sort of, So that's kind of where I am on all this. And so I probably sound like I'm not into free speech anymore on Twitter. sorry, X, whatever the hell we're calling it, because I'm sitting there arguing with people about how, no, she doesn't have some unlimited right to speak like this. She doesn't. And I further added to that. I said, and I'll show you what I said, because this has been an ongoing thing. If you follow me out there, you can go check it out for yourself. Just check out my profile today. It's all out there, but good. If the college is going to ask essay questions about how students handle diversity and inclusion, and they do, as a condition of admission, then I expect them to at least suspend students who behave as hatefully as she did. I mean, good for the goose, good for the gander, right? We have a speech code, we have codes of conduct, et cetera, et cetera. And that's beyond my believing that the Supreme Court got it right when they said, you don't get to disrupt the goings on of what's going on. And that's true, by the way, whether it's private or public. You don't get to walk into a private lecture hall or a private community building or a synagogue or a church or any other private space and say whatever you want to say to disrupt what they're doing there. You don't get to do that. It's trespassing. Even if you're a parishioner. So like, I'm a member of this synagogue, but I'm going to completely disrupt the ceremonies. And, I've given tens of thousands of dollars to this place, but I'm going to stand up here and speak and speak and speak and kick the rabbi off the dais and just be like, sit down, bucko, shut up. Let me stand up here and talk about why all y'all have the wrong politics. Like, imagine I went into a synagogue and did that to lecture my fellow Jews about not being progressives and took over the Saturday morning services and just told everybody else to shut up. They'd have every right to get the police to come in and drag my happy ass out of there. And it's the same if you're a student on a effing campus, even if you paid full ride to be there. You do not get to do that. There are limitations on your speech. People seem to think like because you have a First Amendment, it's the same principle as like I have a Second Amendment right to defend myself. Yes, not with a nuclear weapon. Sorry, no. And you do have a right to defend yourself, but no, that doesn't mean you can make your front lawn into a minefield. You can't put a crocodile-filled moat around your house either. There's limits. There's limits for reasons. Now, you can do it if you're way out in the middle of nowhere and you own all the property and you like crocodiles and you have enough to feed them. I mean, go for it. Do what you want. No one's going to stop you. But when you share space with others and you voluntarily agree to do that, in other words, you can leave. She could leave. You don't like people putting up posters about Israeli hostages? Fucking leave. Deport yourself. You have choices. No one is holding you prisoner at this school and forcing you to consume. Stand here and read these posters or you will fail your class. Then she'd have a point. That's not what's happening. But still, I get this stuff. And I have to explain to people what the questions are they ask in college essays. Like, what have you done to make your school or your community a better place? Describe a community that you're a part of and your place within it. Princeton values community and encourages students, faculty, staff, and leadership to engage in respectful conversations that can expand their perspectives and challenge their ideas and beliefs. As a prospective member of this community, reflect on how your lived experiences will impact the conversations you will have in the classroom, the dining hall, and other campus spaces. What lessons have you learned in life thus far? What will your classmates learn for you? In short, how has your lived experience shaped you? These are actual questions taken from essay prompts, from applications to colleges. I know because I tutor people and help them answer these questions, as dumb as they are, as much as I hate it, and try to have them be as honest as possible. But if we're going to, and every single one of these schools, Washington University, the first one is from the University of California system, and even Princeton, they all get government money because the loan system is federalized. It's all taxpayer. There's one school in this entire country that I know of that is 100% privately funded, and that's Hillsdale. The rest get some measure of government subsidy, and if only by virtue of the fact that their fucking endowments are not taxed. They exist as nonprofit institutions. So, there's that. They're all public. It's a private school. No, it's not. Okay? So, if these government influenced and ostensibly, regulated by the Civil Rights Act 1964, blah, blah, whatever. And, sorry, I take it back. They all are, even Hillsdale, because of the Civil Rights Act. But especially if they get government money, if they're going to have admissions at all, like selective admissions at all, that means not everyone can come. Somebody's discriminated against for some reason. Okay. We did, the Supreme Court just said you can't do it by race. But now they're doing it by things like personality. We could still do it by personality. We can still do it by answers to questions like this. Do you think this question came into being because they no longer can have affirmative action and these questions are very challenging for your basic white student? Even for your basic Asian student? Do you think maybe there was an incentive to create questions like this? Because these are tame. I didn't have the others at the ready when I was posting today. So if they're going to do this and be selective and say, you have to be respectful and you have to do this and you have to do that and you have to do the other, what have you done to make your school or community a better place? How is it making the community a better place to rip down posters of hostages? How is it contributing to the campus life to cause that level of disturbance? And that's just ripping down posters. I really would like to see them start mass suspending the students who show up for the protests that block access to classrooms, keep people in their rooms terrified out of their minds because there's a crowd so large of people calling them dogs and pigs and terrorists and hateful. If that were happening to Muslim students right now on college campuses, there's no question in my mind that every single pro-Israel protester behaving that way would be suspended immediately. Like there wouldn't be well, it depends on the context, nuance, blah, 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 blah. They'd be gone. And even I, as a Zionist and a Jew, would applaud because that is fucked up. You do not get to be that flagrant an asshole and interfere with the goings on of a school that people have paid to go to and are going to pay for the next 20 years of their lives in loan money, or have signed on the dotted line to observe certain codes of conduct because they're on scholarships. They can't even really effectively defend themselves against you because, God forbid, they lose their scholarship to go up against you who are violating all the codes of that scholarship, but maybe someone's paying for you to be there. Like, people have lost the ability to think, you guys. That's what pisses me off. No one is thinking. No one is thinking. Everybody is acting like there has to be an absolute answer. Now, you might be wondering, what about things that happen off campus, like online? Can they be suspended, etc.? The Supreme Court has been very clear. Had this girl just gone online and just been online and been like, this is propaganda, this is bullshit, I don't agree with these, the hostages aren't real, she could have said that all day, every day, from now until eternity. And no matter how uncomfortable it makes me, no matter how uncomfortable it makes the Jewish students on the NYU campus, they couldn't have touched her. Because in the Supreme Court ruling about this issue, they were also very clear that it's not the school's property. It's not happening at the school. It's just not. So this was about a cheerleader involved in a public high school cheer thing. She had a picture of herself with a little, doing this fuck cheer. The message was posted from a convenience store, like off the campus. The cheerleading coaches suspended her for a year after one of her Snapchat connections took a screenshot and shared it with them. The school justified the punishment by invoking the Supreme Court's opinion in Tinker v. Des Moines about being disruptive, materially and substantially disrupting the school day or invading the rights of others. The school further justified Levy's suspension on the ground that social media posts generated off campus can easily be brought onto campus given the widespread use of cell phones. This is the most lame argument I've ever heard. Okay, so no, all right. In ruling in favor of Levy, the Supreme Court did not go as far as we'd hoped. The court held that Tinker may sometimes justify restrictions to off-campus speech. So go back to, let's say, Tulane, where they were off campus technically in the road having their protests, and they got into a big fight with Jewish students, and it was, pretty bad, and they blocked traffic, etc. they maybe could have held them responsible for that kind of conduct. But yeah, I don't think so. It says, we do not believe the special characteristics that give schools additional license to regulate student speech always disappear when a school regulates speech that takes place off campus. However, the Supreme Court emphasized that the situations in which public schools may reach into the private lives of students are sharply limited. The court stated that the leeway the First Amendment grants to schools in light of their special characteristics is diminished when it comes to off-campus speech. The court identified only 4 off-campus contexts where the school's regulatory interest remained significant and may warrant punishment. Now, take notes, because this may come up in your discourse as you're talking to people, and people might be like, well, this was a blah, blah, blah. The bitch in the keffiyeh, she was on the campus. She says it herself. The bulletin board outside Tisch Hall, it's right there where all the students go. Students, clearly students, not non-students, not random passersby, put up the posters. They all share the space equally. Remember, we talked about that. Even if it was a private school, they share the space equally, but especially because it's a public school, who's the government going to choose? You see, this is why having government schools is so dumb. They can't just arbitrarily make a choice. They have to pick a winner and a loser and have some justification for it. So she doesn't fit this description. All she had to do was go online and bitch to her little heart's content. She'd be in the clear. They couldn't take her. They couldn't even take her scholarship away from her. And then if they did, and if they cited some kind of weird hate speech code, you'd even see me defending her as much as I can't stand her. I think her ideas suck. I would have been like, y'all, she did that on her private time and her private platform, like not on the campus, not interfering with your school at all, and you're going to take away her scholarship? Especially because I think these speech codes are bullshit, but this was physical conduct. Okay, so here they are. Serious or severe bullying or harassment targeting particular individuals. Would you say that these protests marching around were thousands of people at a time, or even just hundreds, going through dorms, blocking libraries, etc.? Do you think that constitutes severe bullying or harassment? Because I do. I really do. Yeah. Um, I even think tearing down the posters, especially while there are people standing there recording you and saying, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Why are you doing that? Stop doing that. I want to read the posters. Cut it out. Those don't belong to you. And since we weren't there, but I've seen enough of these videos to surmise that she probably wasn't doing it silently. She's probably like, this is propaganda, which constitutes more harassment and bullying, judging by her rhetoric and that little thing. These Zionist platforms. So she's imputing, like, we don't have to impute intent. She's telling us her intent. She's telling us what she intended to do. Not like, oh, I was just trying to put up another poster. I'm sorry. Was that yours? No, we know what she was up to. Threats aimed at teachers or other students, those have occurred. And they're still not suspending people as often as they ought to. The failure to follow rules concerning lessons, the writing of papers, the use of computers, or participation in other online school activities. So if they were using one of the online platforms, like a chat forum that exists on the website of NYU, where students are supposed to be discussing an assignment, and if she were out there going, all of you Zionists are evil fuckers, blah, 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 they could suspend her for that. Her freedom of speech does not extend to her being harassing to her fellow students in that space. Even in the classroom, if she wanted to turn around and took her like, I think Zionism is bad and you people are wrong, and she kept going, you and you and you and you knew, and just wouldn't shut up, even if the instructor said, that's enough, cut it out, and she kept going, her free speech, there's a line. I grant you it's invisible. I grant you it requires judgment, but we need to get back to judgment in this country. And that's why I say get rid of the public schools. Get rid of government schooling altogether, and it will be a lot easier to draw clear lines where we all see them. We don't have to have endless debates about it, where better than 50% of the time, someone's going to win who ought not win that debate. Not just in the court of public opinion. I mean, in the court. We're going to elevate ideas that don't deserve to be elevated because they're going to play on this and say, like, my freedom of speech is being violated. And you're going to get these people like my conservative friends going, I hate to agree with her. I really do. I hate to agree with people I disagree with. I'm like, then don't, especially when you don't have to, because you don't have to. This doesn't apply. We've gotten so knee jerk. We're so desperately afraid of losing our free speech that we can't use discernment anymore. The Supreme Court explained that there are I didn't even finish, did I? Oh, no, I did. There are three important features of off-campus speech that make it different from on-campus speech and thus make regulation of off-campus speech less justifiable. It's virtually impossible, by the way. First, a school in relation to off-campus speech will rarely stand in loco parentis. Straight up. They don't own the phone. They're not responsible for you in any meaningful way. The court explained that this doctrine applies where the children's actual parents cannot protect, guide, and discipline them. Factors typically not present when it comes to students expressing themselves outside of the school. Now, flip that around. Because we have public schools and because they are in loco parentis on those premises, they're only going to likely double down on their codes and restrictions of speech, claiming in loco parentis, claiming they're disciplining, claiming that this is about building character and social and emotional learning. And well, we can't have this because it's very disruptive and hurts the feelings and it's harmful. All they have to do is redefine things like disruptive, materially, etc. And because they're government, they can. Because they're government, they can change the meaning of the entire English language. And there's not a fucking thing you and I can do about it. Private schools that we could easily opt out of and don't have to pay for, they can't do that because the marketplace, decentralizing that authority will actually allow there to be a marketplace of ideas where other schools are going to go, what are you smoking? What? No. I mean, you parents who want to voluntarily submit yourself to a code of conduct that allows these adults to just willy-nilly change the definition of words on the fly, enjoy. That's your business, I guess. We don't want that. So all these debates do, in my opinion, is illustrate why we shouldn't have public schools. You get organizations like FIRE, defending free speech on campus. You get all the, ACLU, all that. You get this one, Electronic Frontier Foundation. They're all defending freedom. They're all defending freedom. I have yet to see any of them articulate a defense of the freedom to not pay for or attend or any of this shit. Any of it. But then they wouldn't have jobs, would they? There would be no need for FIRE or electronic freedom. They wouldn't need to exist. We're starting in the wrong place. We're starting from the place where because public schools exist, we have to do all this other stuff. And we have to grant these freedoms to like horrendous shit. So I'm saying roll that back and then you don't. You can use your common sense and your judgment again. But since we're not there and we're not going to be there for a very long time, and I have to work within this stupid sandbox that does exist, I'm going to call it straight. And the straight dope is the Supreme Court never said you have some unrestricted right to free speech on a school campus, even when it's public. They didn't say that. Never said that. And you for shit sure don't have a right to a scholarship. There you go. So those are all privileges. Those are privileges. So I know the title was Rights versus Privileges, and I kind of railed on about rights people think they have, they don't have. But yeah, all those things people think are rights are actually privileges, even on state property. Yes. Yes. And I will close by invoking one of my favorite characters in novels and entertainment, and that is Jesse Stone. If you're not familiar with the Jesse Stone series of books or the films with Tom Selleck, I encourage you to check them out, especially the films. I love Tom Selleck so much. But many times in the series of, I don't know how many, it's like 8 movies or something, and there's another one in the making. Many times somebody in a position to discipline or even fire police chief Jesse Stone said, I could fire you. You need to do this. You have to do this, or go do this, go do that. And I could fire you. When he says he's not going to do it, he says, you can, but you can't tell me what to do. See how that works? That's what these students need to know. That's what we need to know. Your rights are not being violated until someone literally, physically, or legally punishes you simply for holding an idea or expressing an idea that in no way, shape, or form hurts anybody else. You're not yelling fire in a crowded theater, or, which, by the way, is sort of fake. But you're just, as I wrote today, being versus doing. What Jesse Stone is saying is, I'll take the consequence. I'm going to go do what I think is right. I'm going to say what I think, what needs to be said, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. And you cannot stop me. You can fire me. You can arrest me. You can, there was all these things you can do, but you can't stop me. So they didn't stop her. Nobody jumped her and threw her to the ground, put handcuffs on her and dragged her away in chains because she ripped down a poster. There were consequences. Haven't we been hearing since 2016? It's just accountability. We're just holding you accountable. That's all. That we're not canceling you. We're just holding you accountable. Remember that? You ever heard that? I've heard that a few times. So the way I put it to people is I say being versus doing. And I'm going to go try to find that where I wrote that because I can't remember off the top of my head. Here we go. And I think this kind of sums it up. You know, your mileage may vary, but here it is. Being versus doing. Ideas in a place are one thing. Ideas leading to actions that create disturbance sufficient to interfere with doing of what one should be able to expect to do, whether because the actions are loud or physically obstructive, have ceased to be just ideas. And I get answers like this. Yes, there can be a lot of nuance to some of these distinctions, but suffice it to say, there's an absolutely enormous amount of room for improvement with respect to how universities are generally handling these matters. Nuance, blah, blah, nuance. And my argument to you guys is yes, but they won't be improved until these state-run and funded and, controlled and subsidized universities and schools are no longer state-run, funded, subsidized, etc. We will be having this argument for the rest of time because of that. It is by nature political. It is by nature going to be who's in power right now is going to decide what your free speech is or isn't, what's a privilege and not, and so forth. So that's the argument we need to be having, not whether this girl, was too much. Her speech was violated. Okay. Anyway, thanks for joining me today on this Friday. I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend. If you're watching on the replay, please check out the other resources in the resources section of the Discord on Woke Screen. We are in the process now. And again, I'm saying this December 8th, 2023. So if you're watching this months or years from now, it already happened. We're in the process of improving the actual Woke Screen website to make it possible for you to access the resources outside of Discord. But for the moment, they are located in Discord, and you will find the replay to this recording as well as all the prior recordings that I've done since launching at Woke Screen there, probably in a few hours. I don't know, maybe sooner if I can get it there. But thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.